only thing that compounds in life, apart from money, is reputation. In a startup, actually overthinking is a disaster. Actually, in India, right, if you actually give somebody, I'm sure it happens in your startup, you need to follow up once. You don't need to do this in China. If you can succeed in India, you can succeed anywhere. We are among the largest manufacturer of garments for all of these large fashion houses everywhere. Right? H&M, Zara, everything we make here. But we've never created a brand. Why? The best marketing is that you don't pay for, right?
Yeah, that's the best one.
Yeah.
Every once in a while during the podcast, I get super proud about myself of what I'm doing because it's the insight of what people have shared with me, which I'm bringing to the world. It's something which I really admire about this whole episode because this episode made me think about this one thing, that the amount of knowledge and value which we get in just 1 hour was insane. This is one of the best episodes I've recorded because we've recorded with Ananth Narayanan, who's the founder of Mensa Brands, who happens to be the fastest unicorn in the country. They became a $1 billion valuation startup in just 6 months. And why? You'll get to know by the end of this episode. We've talked about a lot of stuff. He truly believes that next in India, like in next 10 years, we're going to build $1 billion startups. It's all going to be digital first. It's going to be, every business going to be tech enabled, digital first, D2C, consumers. All of these things are going to happen and the shift is happening. So this is the right opportunity, the right time for you and me to just think about how can we build such massive, enormous, big businesses and can learn from people like him. So we've talked about how to do that step by step. What is the differentiator between a brand to take it from 0 to 20 crores, then 20 crores to 100 crores, then 100 crores to 1000 crores. Then what are the key points which you need to keep in mind when you're starting a brand? What are the key differentiators? How you can make sure that you increase your profit margin? Who are the right people? The first 5 people who you need to hire. How to hire senior people? How to hire junior people? How to make sure that you're joining the right company at the right time and building yourself up in this part? Because I don't know how many topics we've talked about, and I don't have words to say this because you just need to watch this episode till the end and you love it. Mark my words that this is one of the best episodes we've recorded. Enjoy the show with Ananth Narayanan of Mensa Brands. The first question I had, I wanted to start right off that note is, I'm really curious to know that you were into auto and you said like you were into engineering and then you went to consulting.
Yep.
Like what was that and how did that happen? Like can engineers become good consultants?
I think the answer is yes, because engineering and consulting both have one common thing.
Okay.
You have to be a good problem solver. Consulting, by the way, you get thrown into a problem and you just have to figure it out.
Okay.
Because you just don't know that industry and you have to appear smart, right? So I think problem solving is the real skill, right? So I think to that extent, it actually worked well, right? And the second is you have to be good with people, not maybe in automotive, but certainly in consulting. And I think those are the 2 skills I think that are quite important.
Needed. Yeah. But so, for example, you did engineering from Michigan.
Yep.
You had your plans. So you never wanted to become like the actual builder or the developer in the company, or you always wanted to do consulting?
No. In fact, by the way, I actually never wanted to be a consultant.
Okay.
So I finished Michigan and my dream job was Cummins. I wanted to go design engines.
Okay.
Right? That's what I wanted to do. And it was in the middle of nowhere where Cummins is headquartered. But McKinsey just offered me a little bit more money. I had debt and I thought it was an interesting business because, it seemed like a great set of people. So I make a lot of my decisions not analytically but based on people. Right? And I think that stood me well over time. I really liked the senior partner called Felix that I just connected with. So connecting with people is important. I felt like this is a group of people who will take care of me and I'll learn something. So I said, and they paid me more than Cummins. So I said, why not try that? And I ended up sticking with them for 15 years.
Interesting. And you got your first thing in US, not in India?
Yes. I joined in the Cleveland office of McKinsey and I was in Cleveland and Chicago mostly.
Okay. And for how long you were there?
I was there for about 7 years. Then I lived for 3 years in China.
Okay.
I lived in Shanghai. And then I came back to Chennai, which is where I'm from, and spent 5 years with McKinsey in Chennai. And then to Bangalore.
Oh, now I have so many things to talk about. You've just broken down things for me. US, China, India, then your obviously rest of your journey. Just gonna start it from this.
Yeah.
So you said you look at the people And if you vibe with people, or you find that they're going to be the ones who are going to help you out in your career,
Yeah.
you like them.
Yes.
So what are the traits which you look in the people, and how can you judge that?
Yeah, no, great question. I think the first thing I look for is empathy. Do they try and understand your perspective?
Okay.
Right? How do they do an interview? You can make out, right? I mean, if they ask a little bit more about you and they're a little bit less about just asking a question, that's one indicator.
Okay.
Right? Second is, by the way, the only thing that compounds in life, apart from money, is reputation.
Yeah.
Reputation compounds, right? So you do a little bit of research on the person. You talk to 2, 3 people. I never, by the way, either hire a person or go work for somebody without doing 5 independent ref checks. I talk to 5 people that have sort of either been part of their life, their friends, whatever, and I always make up my mind that way, right?
Wow.
Because it really helps, right? Because you know something about
Yeah.
that person. So one is empathy.
Second is
Second is
reputation.
just the reputation and doing a ref check around the reputation, right? Just not taking your reputation for granted, right? I think the third, in some way, is the reputation of the organization as well,
Okay.
right? So for me, by the way, at least early on, and this is different from the startup phase, right? At that time, McKinsey still is a great place, but it felt like a very cool place to go join, right? It seemed like a fun, cool place to go join, right?
Okay.
You know, a lot of people that I know who are, you know, seniors of mine in college all went there. So all of that sort of played in. That's how I sort of
That's a
made
Google
that.
check. So did you do, by the way, ref check for this podcast as well? Did you ask your 5 people?
I did a ref check by checking out a couple of people that you've interviewed.
Okay.
I do. You can't take that out of me.
Yeah. So now you said the reputation part,
Yeah.
right? Now a lot of our viewers and a lot of people who are watching this probably are young.
Yep.
They're probably building their own startups or
Yep.
small businesses, or maybe are at a place in a company where they see that, hey, I've joined a startup and then I want to grow here instead of joining a large firm, right?
Yep.
How can I'm going to ask you I'm going to divide this question into, or maybe you have one answer for both of them. So how can a young startup build their reputation to attract the right talent?
Oh, it's a terrific question. What was the second question? You said you have two.
The second is how can a young leader or a young
Build
manager
himself a reputation.
build self reputation?
Yeah. So let me start with the startup piece, right?
Yeah.
I think in startups, the way you build your reputation is twofold. How you let go of people matters. Every startup will go through ups and downs. You will let go of people. How you let them go, and the reputation of people who are no longer part of your organization is the one that drives most reputation, right? So I think, so the interaction, actually, let me just expand that. I think when you come in, independent of whether you take that person or not, when you interview somebody, the experience that they go through makes the reputation. The way you exit them from an organization makes a reputation. I think these two, by the way, are lasting because they're moments in time where people remember.
First and last
Impression people remember. So I think doing these two well, even if you're a young startup, right? It doesn't matter. The first employee you hire, how you hire them, whether you're gracious about it, whether you send a nice note saying excited to have you, right? You don't have to send anything, right? You may not be able to afford to send a gift,
Yeah.
but sending a nice note helps. Likewise, by the way, I went through, we all go through phases. I think in various companies, I've had to let go of people, senior people, mid-level people. Doing it nicely, making sure they're successful, making sure they understand why it may not be a good fit, goes a long way in building a reputation. I have a lot of people who, professionally it may not have worked out, but we are still friends, right?
Yeah.
So I think getting these 2 points is very important for a reputation. The second is governance. I know it's a long, deep topic, but I think having a reputation for being squeaky clean in your dealings as an early stage startup is important, right? What do I mean by that? The cap table that you have, how you actually conduct yourself. Do you actually close your books and get a reputed firm to sort of do your first financial year? All these seem like small things, especially when you're in a hurry.
Yeah.
And you're growing revenue, growing your users,
Yeah.
growing your X, right? But this 10% and paying attention to the 10% builds your reputation enormously, right? Because it's just, so people, exit and entry, number one. Number two is focusing on governance early and getting some basic building blocks right is really, really important.
Okay.
That's
The
how you
small
build a
things.
reputation, right? The last way to build a reputation is the hard one, but you make investors money every time.
That's the best way.
That's the best way.
That's the
Because eventually, by the way, reputation carries through, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you made money for your investors every time, that reputation carries through. So, and sorry, one more ad. When you go through a tough time as a startup, and you have to, let's say, sell at a distress, do a down round. How you do it and how you take care of your investors matters. If you try and maximize for yourself and not for your investors, that ruins the reputation.
Oh. Yeah, that's a good one. Actually, because I can think of people, a lot of people who get into startups. They are getting into startups because they want to maximize wealth for themselves.
Correct.
And that's good way, but they're always just thinking about it.
Yes.
They're not thinking about the other people who are backing them. How can they
Yeah.
maximize them?
My short advice to anybody, right, is maximize the wealth for your investors. I guarantee you, you will maximize wealth for yourself. If you do the right things, right, for people who put money into your business, it will work out.
Yeah.
Right?
So. No, it's a good way. I think the first and last impression also like hit me really well.
Yeah.
Now the question is like anyone who's starting up.
Yes.
You from the consulting point of view and now from the startup point
Yep.
of view. It's early, it's seed round. Okay, now they're just getting their first founding team. Who are the first 5 people who people need to get right? Like the 5 categories or the 5 departments or the 5 people who you feel.
Yeah, I think.
How should they hire? Like, what are the right people to?
Yeah, so I think I would go less on category and I'll go on more on people and characteristics, right? So I think early stage. I'll talk about consumer companies.
Yeah,
because
let's
I think
talk
SaaS,
about. I was
let's
going to
talk
say
about
the same
consumer
thing.
companies, right? Because otherwise, I think SaaS
Yes,
company would be
yes.
very different, etc.,
Yes.
etc.
Let's talk about consumer companies hardcore.
Consumer and D2C. I think the first characteristic is people who actually get shit done. Right?
Executioners.
Execution. I mean, you don't need 5 thinkers. You need people who can actually go hustle and get stuff done, right? So, I mean, I can say this because I'm from McKinsey, right? I mean, don't get too many consultants,
Yeah.
right? Get people who can actually go and get stuff done, right? I mean, if you're that's one. Who are now the people to get, right? I would, by the way, say the first and foremost is to get a great performance marketing person. The second person to get is a great tech person.
Yeah.
Right? Product and tech you can combine, get a great product and tech person. The third to get actually for a D2C consumer startup is an ops person.
Yeah.
And I think most people forget that. So if you take CX, supply chain, inventory management, planning, all the things that don't seem very cool but are really important to get a product to a customer,
Yeah.
right? Get someone, right? Most people think you can outsource it. You can get it done through a third-party agency, but it's core to your business. So you need to have one person who sort of anchors it.
Yeah.
The fourth is, interestingly, find a talent acquisition person.
Oh, right from
Day one. It's one of the things that's worked very well for us at Mensa. Our 6th or 7th person that we hired was actually somebody who helped us with TA. It's been great for us, right? Because you're able to, because, if you scale, right, you need people and you need great people. And therefore, getting that right is important. And the last, I would say, is actually assuming that the founder is doing the P&L and the brand and all of that, right? I would say is to get at least a good business finance person, if not a controller. So that you start to understand the economics of it.
Yeah.
Right? From the very beginning.
Because unit economics is everything.
Unit economics is everything. Right?
In D2C business. I know. Man, I remember one of the fuck-ups I made during pandemic. So I started selling my disinfectant sprays on Amazon. And I did like tremendously good sales.
Yeah.
Right? But so tax slab was 18%.
Right.
But while signing up.
Yeah, you thought it was.
Yeah, I forgot to correct that to 18% and automatically Amazon put it 40%.
Got it.
And it was
like
1 month of my effort and everything just went down to drain. Right?
Yeah. And I think these small things matter, right?
The small understanding that is one of the biggest things which people need to understand. Now, I want to go deeper in every category.
Yep.
Okay. So let's say first you said the tech person.
Yes.
So consumer business is pretty straight business, right? That's what people say. Why do we need tech in consumer business?
Yeah, no, again, great question. So there is, firstly, by the way, if you think about a consumer brand today, a consumer brand today sells on marketplaces. A consumer brand sells today on D2C. A consumer brand sells on offline.
Yeah.
These are the sort of 3 sort of distribution channels that you're doing through. Each of the processes needs to be actually thought through a little. And then there's the backend, which is how much inventory do you need? How will you supply the inventory? What will you make available? What products do you make? And how do you make sure that you select those products? For the first couple of months, you're fine, by the way, doing all of this manually. But if you have a product person who thinks about pricing from the very beginning, a product tech person, you will think about pricing very differently, right? So when we started Mensa, right, We had we have now 23 brands.
Okay.
You can't sort of do everything manually, right? So even for pricing, 23 brands times 3 competitors times 6 channels suddenly is a lot of data. So how do you scrape that data and how do you look at pricing and how do they give recommendations? If you think about it from day one, you'll set it up from day one. Second is, what data do you capture? Amazon, for example, which you talked about, allows you to store data only for 90 days,
Yeah.
right? But you need history.
Yep.
So how do you set up your data from the very beginning so that you're capturing the data that's required? You may not insight that data early on, but a year from now, you'll regret not having it.
Yeah, I know this.
So I think that's the reason you need the tech person. And the third is, by the way, unless you as the founder are the tech person, you want to ensure that tech is the part of the way in which somebody thinks. If they think of an ops problem, you think tech first. If you think of a category problem, you think tech first. And having a solid product and tech person in your team allows you to do that. And that helps you build for the long term. I think one of the biggest things that Myntra did from the very beginning was having product and tech. So, what is the insight in Myntra? Right? The insight in Myntra is fashion is a browse category, not a search category.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a discovery.
It's a discovery category. Therefore, by the way, the metric that matters is the time spent and the number of visits. That is immediately correlated to the number of purchases and the lifetime value of the consumer. Therefore, building a platform that's easy to use, browse, and spend time is really, really important. Therefore, having a seamless experience of how do you actually think about fashion, how do you engage the customer, etc., was critical to making this happen. Once you had that insight, right, making it real, I think you needed the product and tech person to do it.
Yeah. Okay, let's come to ops now. Okay.
Yeah.
What are the I'm gonna ask you like a super dumb but straight up question, which I think is gonna help a lot of people in hiring, right?
Yeah.
So you're hiring a first ops guy.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the 3 things you're gonna look into their CVs? Okay. And it's the starting of the business. And let's say what is the CTC which you'll expect to give to this person, like the first ops guy? You're not the ops person. You just know there's a great product. I know how to source it. अब मैं मेरे platform पे list कर दूंगा. My tech is sorted. I need an ops person.
So CTC, I would say, is between 20 and 30. Right? Is roughly what I think you should do. I think you should look for an ops person who has been in a large e-commerce platform.
Large.
And the reason I say that, by the way, is you've seen scale at some point, right? It's important in ops in particular. It's important to think, process, and scale. And it's easier to do that if you've done it. The ideal combination is someone who's worked in a large commerce platform and before that has maybe done a small startup of their own. Or, by the way, has sort of started and failed in a startup.
So they need to have experience of ground zero.
They need to have ground zero
from 1
and
to
scale.
10 as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can be a junior person in a large e-commerce platform, but if you've done that, plus you've actually done your own startup or been part of a founding team of a startup that's failed, even better if it's failed, right? You've actually seen some failure. That, in my mind, is an ideal candidate.
Nice. Okay. So you answered that, and you don't need, like, let's say a lot of people say that because ops is like one of the biggest things you need to, and D2C specifically, don't you need like a senior hire in ops from day one?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you need initially people who are on the ground. I think a lot of ops is really about getting stuff done. I think you need initially people who can hustle and get stuff done. A year and a half into it, then I think you'll need to get more senior people. Now, obviously, all of this depends on how fast your company grows, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, in Mensa, by the way, we have a great senior operations leader, right? And we hired them early because our model was also such that you got big very fast, right? And there you need someone seasoned and senior because you now have 20 companies that you're managing and so on. But otherwise, if you're a classic one single brand startup, I would say look for someone who's done a startup and failed and worked in ops in a large e-commerce company.
Interesting. So that's your day one. Okay. Now there's one more part of it, like D2C. A lot of people don't pay attention to it. That's sourcing of your product.
Yep.
Right? Do you think we should get sourcing guy from day one as well?
I don't think so.
Because you're doing the sourcing.
Because you have to do it. As the founder, I mean, you have to sort of be responsible for something. I think you have to sort of say, what is the product and where do I source from? Right? So I'll give you an example. We have, as I said, 20 plus brands in Mensa today. I must have met 700 plus founders, right, in the last sort of 15, 16 months to get to these 20. 80% of those founders, all are profitable, all are between 10 and 100 crores in revenue. But all of them, I mean, well, not all, 80+% call it, right, are people who are actually doing their own sourcing and their own product development.
Hardcore purchase people.
See, I mean, you have to know something well. No? I mean, as
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
as a founder, right? I mean, you have to be passionate about something. You don't need to necessarily know, but you have to do. Even if you don't know, you learn.
Yeah.
You have to go visit like those 10 suppliers.
You have to be very on grounds, hands on with it, so that'll give you a depth of your own business.
That's right.
And,
Good.
okay.
Yep.
So now let's talk about as a consultant. So you're from a consulting background,
Yes.
right? You're from engineering. So always problem solving.
Yes.
How do you approach a problem of a startup? So because let's say a lot of people say startup is an opportunity, but opportunity means problem.
Yes.
Right. So if you solve that problem, then only it's an opportunity. So how do you look at it? What are the factors you look at it? Let's say okay, let's divide it into two parts. One, people who are at the idea stage. How do you look at the ideas and like approach that? And then the other, which is the scale stage.
Right. So I'll answer both and then I'll give you a caveat. I think firstly, one of the biggest things you have to unlearn from consulting to startup is too much problem solving.
Okay.
Right. And the reason I say that is in consulting, you have more difficult problems and you need to solve them in a deep manner. Right. Because you've been hired to do that. Right. I mean, there is a company with a very complicated problem in one particular area that you go in and deeply problem solve.
So you've been hired to overthink.
Yeah. If you want to make fun of consultants, we can say overthink. That's right. Right. But in a startup, actually overthinking is a disaster. I think it is better to make higher velocity of decisions than get all your decisions right.
Go deeper.
I would be very worried if I got 100% of my decisions right. I should only get 2/3 of my decisions right and I should make them fast.
Speed over perfection.
Speed over perfection in decision making from an ops standpoint really matters, right? You have to make small decisions but keep making them. Now, I also believe that, in a startup, there are one or two big decisions, right? The big decisions you should take time to do. Which market do you want to play in? Who are the set of investors you want to have on your cap table? These are all irreversible decisions. Those you should take time for. But from a regular operating the startup standpoint, making faster decisions is more important than making perfect decisions. So I think that's one macro thing I want to do. If you go back to the question of how do you approach I have a very simple rule on how do you actually think about starting. Is it a large market? Is it a complicated problem? Do you know something about that problem? These are the only three questions you need to ask. When I don't do as much angel investing as many of the people in your podcast, but I've now done almost nothing because now we actually end up buying companies, etc. It becomes harder to actually do this. But that's the only question I ask. Is it a great market? Is this a difficult problem? Because if it's an easy problem, there'll be too much competition.
Yep.
And third is, by the way, does the founder know something or do I see something in that person that I know that they will persevere, right? And there's like resilience. So these are the only three things I look for. And that's the only thing to look. If you're a startup founder, if you can basically say, look, I'm passionate about this problem. It's a large market and it's complicated. That's all you need. Don't overthink. Because starting up requires a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
So I think that's on the startup. Scale up, I think you can be much, much more problem solving oriented and figuring out what to do, right? In my mind, if you look at scale up, what do you need? You need people, you need process/expertise, and you need capabilities. What prevents a company from scaling, right? One is they don't have capital.
Yeah.
Right? You just don't have money, you don't have working capital,
yeah.
you don't have access. Second is you may have access to capital, but you can't hire the right people for the right job. Right?
Yeah.
Third is
big pain.
You haven't put in place some process, right? See, for example, after you're 1,000 crore company, if you've never closed your books or you don't have an accounting process in the back end, it's very hard, right? So you need, or by the way, you don't have a warehouse, right? I mean, it's just really, really, really difficult. So from a scale-up standpoint, the way I would think about the problems is there a process problem? Is there a people problem? Or is there a capital problem? I think bucketing it into those three and solving each of them is important. On the capital, you have to ask how much do you need, for how long do you need it? In the case of people, you have to sort of problem solve it down to what are the three key hires, which we started with earlier, right? And in the process, you have to figure out how do you balance out speed and bureaucracy? Speed, bureaucracy, and control, right? That's when you have 100 crores of inventory, you need some inventory controls. When you have 50,000 rupees of inventory, you don't worry about inventory control, right? So, you have to sort of balance those two out.
Okay. Now let's talk about your journey
Yep.
in US, China, and India.
Yep.
Okay. What is the thing which you have like what you've seen, like why is US like the world power? Like what do they do differently? What does China do differently so that they're raising at crazy level? And what is India doing right now which you feel like eventually India is gonna be a powerhouse?
Yeah. I'm
Right.
going to stick a little bit more to consumer internet and
Yeah.
just the view of the consumer internet, because I think otherwise the economies just are very, very different,
Yep.
right? Um, I think what the US does, which allows it to do, is I think ability to fail fast without any stigma attached allows for lots of experimentation. You take Slack, right? Slack used to be a game called Glitch. I don't know if you know this, but you know, the original thing was they were creating a metaverse and they were trying to create this game called Glitch, which failed. But they had actually engineers all around, and they created a communication protocol for engineers to collaborate, which eventually became Slack, right?
Yeah.
But the ability to fail, but not have no stigma attached, be able to raise money again, and therefore experiment, right? I think it's like incredible. I think that's one thing that America gets right. The other thing is, if you look at the Silicon Valley thing, which I think we need to do more in India, I'll come to that in a bit, is the ability of having mentorship, research, and capital together. You have Stanford and Berkeley, right? You have incredible culture of mentorship, right? You
Yeah.
call anybody, right? They
Yeah.
will return your call, they will help you, they will spend a coffee with you and give you some advice, right? And therefore you feel, even if they don't give you money, right? You
Yeah.
feel supported.
Yeah.
And third is there's a lot of venture capital going around. So this combination is deadly, right? I mean, you're able to create these incredible companies. So I think these are the two big things that America, I think that's why it continues to lead in technology, right? Ability to fail fast, no stigma attached,
And
rise again,
infrastructure support.
and this support structure. I think this is like superb, right? I lived in China, as you know. Um, and I think one thing China did, I don't know if it'll apply to us. I mean, I think the bus is left, so it doesn't matter. But I think China, I was there, by the way, in 2002 to 2005.
Okay.
If you remember, IBM's PC division got bought by Lenovo at that point of time. It was the first major Chinese external acquisition that happened. Alibaba, Tencent were all just taking off. JD
Okay.
were all taking off.
Okay.
One thing they did is they created a bit of a walled garden.
Okay. What do you mean a walled garden?
So they didn't let any external competition happen. So all their companies grew without a lot of external competition for like a fair amount of time, right?
Yeah.
So they got to like massive scale before they let competition in. And by that time, by the way, you're home,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So you look at Alibaba, you look at Tencent, you look at any of these. Now, if you look at India, that hasn't happened, right?
Yeah.
Because you've had competition from day zero.
Yep.
If you're a homegrown company, you always have some global competitor with huge amounts of capital. And because of that, by the way, the Indian entrepreneur also has to raise a lot of capital and ends up not owning much, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so China's model was, I think, two things work for it. One is this walled garden. Second is superb execution. I think the ability to get down to the last level of detail and just get stuff done is just spectacular to see. You know, you actually in India, right? If you actually give somebody, I'm sure it happens in your startup, you need to follow up once, then you have to follow up twice, then you have to say, did you really get it done? Then you have to go check whether it's actually. You don't need to do this in China, right? You tell somebody, it actually gets done. So there is a mindset which I think we need to get a little bit more on. I think it's improved dramatically in India
Yeah.
also, by the way. So I think these two work: the wall garden and this intense focus on execution. I think what's happening in India, which I think is superb, and I think the next 10 years, therefore, are going to be the best 10 years, is one, we have the demographics, right? I mean, we have two things going for us. We have a very young mobile internet using population.
Yeah.
Second, we have no modern retail, for example.
Hmm.
I mean, relatively speaking, our modern
Yeah.
retail penetration is so low.
Yep.
Therefore, it's unbranded to branded that's happening. Therefore, there's a massive shift, and therefore, there'll be a massive
Unorganized
number
market to now category.
category. And it's true across all sectors. But
100%.
and therefore, there's a huge opportunity in my mind just to create businesses and brands.
Yeah.
Right. I think the third is we have among the most inventive, hustle-oriented set of engineers, product and startup entrepreneurs. Right. And I think you look at the first generation of large successes, Sachin and Binny at Flipkart, any of these, right? Ola, many of them have created now role models for people.
Yep.
If you go in my, when I graduated from college, I'm a little older, right? So when I graduated from college, like the best thing to do would be to go join maybe a consulting company potentially a Google, Microsoft, etc. Right now, if you look at it, most people say, "I want to start something," right?
Yeah.
And that's massive, and that's so nice to see. I think entrepreneurship has become sexy,
Yep. It is
and
now.
and it is sexy, and I think that is huge, and therefore there is now a bunch of people saying, "I want to create," and then the law of probability holds. If enough number of people try, some will be outsized successes, right? So for India, I feel like the next 10 years will be our best 10 years because we have demographics, we have structural tailwinds in creating businesses, and we have a population which is very hustle oriented towards creating, and now has confidence in itself, saying that I can go create a job. Like I don't have to go work for someone, I can create a job. I think this is what I think India is going for the next 10 years, in my view.
Yeah. And I can now that I'm thinking about how did I start everything,
Yeah,
like these are the major factors which played a role in my thing as well.
right.
So I read a book called $10 Trillion.
Yep.
Okay, it's like
BCG book.
BCG book.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this was about India, China,
Yeah.
and the book's like centrally idea is like the the middle class is growing,
Yes.
and that's where the biggest opportunity is.
Yep.
So India has always had like either in US they have luxury brands. India has never had like massive luxury or mass
Right.
premium brands. So there's a
Right.
huge opportunity for India, and that's where I started. So that's why my dishwash gel, the detergent which we got,
Right.
we were always operating in mass premium.
Yep.
Everybody told us that we're stupid to do it, but because we did it, it's helped us scale a lot.
Yep.
Right. So mass premium worked out. So the book helped me because you
Yeah.
understood that.
Yep.
Then the second was at that time when I started in 2013. At that time, like just Oyo was 2014-15ish. Oyo was like become like the entrepreneurs, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
poster
Of
boy.
course. Of course.
So I was like,
Ritesh and
dude,
team
like
have done,
someone
yeah,
of
yeah.
my age
Yeah.
can do
Yeah,
like
of course.
something like this. This is
course.
just like super
Yeah.
role modelish, inspiring, and
right.
that took me courage to go and do these kind of things. Okay, like just go out and like try to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like
No,
both
I
the things
mean,
work.
you're the absolute example of this, right?
Let's talk about the India part, right?
Yep.
Then I had a question, like because now that you're talking about India is going to see young audience, digital first buyers,
Yeah.
discovery based buying, small business opportunity. We're going from one category,
Yep.
like unorganized to organized market. These are huge tailwinds to go about.
Yes.
Okay. But we've often spoken about our capacity to pay.
Yep.
Like, do you feel that India has your what do you call it, price propensity per user?
Yeah.
Do we have
price
that?
parity? Yeah, purchasing price parity or
Purchasing
price
price
propensity.
parity,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yes, it's getting better, but it's getting better slower. I'll give you an example. Today, one of our brands called Karagiri sells saris. Okay, 6,000 rupee ASP, which I thought would never sell online.
Yeah,
6,000 rupees is a lot of rupees.
It's a lot,
It's
yeah.
very. We're doing like a 60, 70 crore business, right? And it's growing rapidly. So I think it's changing. I think there is now more propensity to pay. I think there are two things that are happening. One, I think the current generation, which is between, I would call it 20 and 30, looks for experiences more than savings in many ways. Therefore, they spend a little bit more. I think so that's changing, right? And I think that's really important. And I think that will shape brands.
Yeah.
However, I will tell you that the bulk of the market is still mass and mass premium, right?
Yeah.
I think the true luxury market in India is still very non-existent, and everybody who wants luxury also travels abroad,
Yep.
and therefore
Exactly.
is able to buy it outside,
Exactly.
right? So I think mass and mass premium, we are always going to be a value-conscious market at all segments. Even if you buy an expensive thing, you want value for it, right?
Yep.
I think it's just in our nature.
Yep.
So I think India consumer is always going to be value-conscious, and therefore, if you can succeed in, here's the other twist: if you can succeed in India, you can succeed anywhere. So we have now 30% of our revenue coming from outside India. We're taking all our brands global. One question I always have is, we are among the largest manufacturer of garments for all of these large fashion houses everywhere, right? H&M, Zara, everything we make here. But we've never created a brand. Why? So we're taking our brands now from India global. And because now distribution is free, right?
Yeah.
Not free, but it's easy.
Easier. Very
Right.
easy for you to. The entry barriers are like
Entry
low.
barriers are lower. So it's a level playing field now, right?
You know, I usually say this to like most of my people in my organization. Like in India, if you are building a mass brand, the customers is gonna compare the amount of price he's paying versus the features he's getting.
That's right.
And if you're in the luxury market, the customer is going to compare the amount he's paying versus the show off capabilities of their product.
It's an interesting way to frame it. By the way, I think it's true. I
Right.
think it's true. I think the feature to cost is really, feature to value is really what I think the mass and mass premium is all about.
Like, even if somebody, so I've spoken to a lot of people who buys like, let's say LV, Gucci, they go to Selfridges in
Yeah.
London and like buy some expensive stuff. And I've always spoken to them, like, why do they do that? Like, why? It's this story which they want to marinate and just talk about.
Of course. Anytime you buy a luxury item, right, where the cost to MRP is more than 7, you are only buying it for vanity. I'll come to, just switching topics, I'll come to one of my favorite topics on wine.
Okay.
Wine is a classic example of a luxury item, right? So here's a question for you. There is a wine which is very expensive, like call it north of $500, right? Whatever, some large number, right? What do you think is the cost price of that wine? Like, what does it take to actually make that wine?
Wow. I'm assuming that if the wine is, so you're taking a luxury market?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming the wine is really nice,
Really nice,
well-made,
beautifully
like,
made, etc. $500 bottle.
Yeah, it'd be $100 at least.
It's $20. So I'm saying, by the way, a lot of the reason I'm bringing this up is at the highest end of the segment, right? You're selling a story, you're selling a brand story, you're selling an experience. It's not necessarily value to cost. I think at the next level, I think it becomes very much value play, right?
Yeah. But even there, like, it's a value play. Like, just the ability to talk about the story.
Yes.
Is you're gonna compare with the amount of money
That's
you're
right.
paying.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So that's you need to have a USP, and that USP is unique show of proposition.
Unique show proposition. Nice.
That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's a question.
Yeah.
And it's generally coming from a point because I come from a manufacturing background.
Yep.
And I've seen businesses, like small businesses, struggling to make more. Right. So manufacturing is getting democratized.
Yep.
Right. So it's very easy to have something or the other. 10 people are making. So your cost
Sure.
leadership is dying.
Yep.
Right? So how do you make sure that you come in the market and you command more gross margin? Most people say the branding is the right way to do it. Like if you build a brand, right?
Yeah.
But I want to ask you from a consumer brand perspective.
Yeah.
So the D2C brand, how can people build their cost leadership or maybe like just increase their profits? Like what is the way to do it?
Yeah. So I would say, look, firstly, if you think about it, distribution is democratized because now for 140 rupees, you can reach 24,000 pin codes in India, more or less, through Myntra, Amazon, Flipkart, Nykaa, any of them, right? That was not the case when you have a classic FMCG business, right? You take a Unilever with 3 tiers of distribution and a few million touch points. That was the moat. Because to get to every part of India, you needed the distribution. So that's gone, right? The second is brand building is now less expensive. Because if you think about it, what is e-commerce percentage of retail sales? 8%, right? In the COVID year, maybe 9.5. But I'm saying, it's 8% give or take, right? But if you look at the amount of product that gets researched online before you buy it, that number is closer to 50%. So even if you're buying like this jacket that you're buying, right? Even if you don't buy it online, you will go research.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And therefore, brand building is now happening more digitally.
Okay.
So these are two macro shifts. That's why it's so easy to launch a brand now. But what makes it hard to scale a brand, I think is your question, right? See, if you take a brand, right, usually if you take fashion, beauty or home, usually it's a 70% gross margin business when you buy from a manufacturer.
Okay.
Right, roughly. Then, by the way, roughly commissions, logistics, all of that take away another 30%.
Okay.
So, you now have 40% left. Marketing is the killer in making money. And growth and marketing becomes the killer, right? If you basically spend 40% or 50% on marketing, then you lose money. If you are able to spend 30% and get word of mouth and virality, then you make money. So I think the ability to grow without spending a lot on marketing is the key to making your life sustainable in a high gross margin business like lifestyle that I'm in, right? Like if you take fashion, beauty and home, generally the product cost is good, right? I mean, gross margins are good in the business, right?
Yeah.
Not like, say, a mobile phone where you have much lower gross margins. There, the magic is, can you spend less on performance marketing and can you make more of it basically pull-based so that there's some virality associated with it, right? The best marketing is that you don't pay for, right?
Yeah. That's the best one.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you said like marketing is give and take. It's make or break for
Yep.
most of the businesses
Yep.
right now. Specifically in every D2C brand, let's just talk about.
Yes.
Right? Most of it's about brand building. So what should D2C business should get right? Like what are the three components they
Yeah.
should
So I'm going to
focus on
divide it up
in
into three
marketing?
parts. Okay. First is if you're a less than 20 crore brand. The second is we're a 20 to 100 crore brand, and then more than a 100 crore brand.
Okay.
Because they're three very different things that you have to do in marketing. In the less than 20 crore brand, don't do marketing. Only, by the way, get your product right. I want fabulous reviews and ratings. I want to make sure that the product works. I want to make sure that people tell their friends about the fact that the product is superb. Focus 80% of your attention not on marketing, but on making sure that the product is great, the consumer experience and the consumer love is great.
But how do you differentiate the product in the beginning? So let's say I'm giving an
So
example. I'm launching a T-shirt.
Yeah.
It's so easy to launch a T-shirt today.
Yes.
Like just go to website and
Yeah.
launch it, right?
Yeah.
But
No, but I'll tell you, the details matter.
okay.
What cotton you use matter. Whether you, just because we're talking about t-shirts and I know a little bit about t-shirts, right? You know, having a sweat patch matters. The label matters. The feel of it matters. If you actually do a graphic t-shirts, how you do the graphics matters. Can you do some innovation around that matters, right? So for example, could you basically build in a interesting graphic with a QR code that actually leads to some content when somebody looks at the t-shirt? These details matter, right? If you launch an undifferentiated product in a crowded market, it's hard to succeed.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm saying, by the way, what I'm telling you though is the product has to be differentiated early on. See, or you have to say, look, I'm from a large manufacturing house. I have a structural cost advantage. I'm going to just make the cheapest t-shirt and sell. Different play.
Yeah.
But then you're not a D2C brand with pull. So creating a differentiated product matters, right? I mean, you know, how you do your jeans matter. What, you know, clothes actually details matter. The label matters.
Yeah.
The fit matters, right?
Yeah.
Fit you can talk about for hours. Actually getting the fit and the size and fit right.
It's the most difficult thing
It's
in
the most
jeans.
difficult thing to get right in jeans. But if you get that right and you have a reputation for it, then that reputation carries, right? So I think initially focus on product. So
So
then
20 crores is build a super product, differentiated product, and something which can put out a value which is enough for people to talk about it.
That's right. From 20 to 100, you basically have to do 80% performance marketing and 20% brand marketing, right?
Okay.
And I'll tell you a bit of what I mean by that, right? 80% performance marketing is you have to master Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra, Nykaa, Agio algorithms. How do they work? What works on visibility? What works on growth? It's actually a hard skill. You know, in the old days, I'll come to Google and Facebook in a bit, right? But 70% of commerce still happens through the marketplaces. You have to figure out how to. In a retail store, where the product is placed matters, right?
Yeah.
In Amazon, the first 4 swipes matter. How do you get on those first 4 swipes without paying the maximum amount of money that you can pay, right? Right? That's the core skills, right? And it's mathematical, it's analytical, and you have to build that capability. You have to do hundreds of experiments. Which keywords to bid on, how much to bid on, which which panels do you bid on, right? Do you do display advertising versus product advertising? That's a skill. So that's one big skill too.
That's where your performance marketer enters.
Really comes through, right? The second is brand marketing. And here my counterintuitive thing is it's not about running campaigns. It is about having a continuous all the time on marketing for 24/7 that basically allows the brand to become known. You know, you should build up a social media following. You should build up engagement. You should basically be relevant and be in communities where the brand is being talked about. So this is not a lot about, I get a celeb and I run a campaign, right? It's much more about having conversations about the brand, having micro influencers talk about the brand, doing a whole bunch of things that doesn't cost a lot of money on brand building because you're still building the business, right? And then still making sure that there's a brand presence, a social media presence that's interactive, nice, and relevant to the brand. 100 crores and up, you have to switch, right? There you have to get to pull. That's the right time in my mind to do TV. That's the right time to do aspiration, right? You want pull now. You want people now, the single easiest metric is, are you searching for shirts and is your brand coming up? Or are you searching for brand X? Right? Brand searches have to go up. Because from 100 to 1,000 crores, you're not going to go there unless your brand becomes a pull-based brand, right? So we have now a brand called Pebble,
Okay.
which does smartwatches, and there we have Tiger Shroff. We're doing brand campaigns, etc., right? Which is doing well. We have now a north of 100 crore brand, which we're doing a brand campaign called Dennis Lingo, which does great shirts. And for that, we're now going to get a brand ambassador, do a TV campaign. We're north of 100 crores. We
Yeah.
want to get
Now
to
that's like
1,000
a bigger
crores.
market.
Yeah. And there you need to be on TV, on everything. You need to have boards. That's, by the way, a good time for you to go offline because the brand becomes real,
Yeah. Yeah. Post
right?
100 crores is like.
Yeah, because you want to see stores because the brand becomes real for you, right? So all of that starts to, because you have to go from push to pull. Up to 100 crores you can push. From 100 to 1,000 you need to create pull.
Yeah. Okay. Now I have an interesting question for all the three categories. Is just quickly tell me one brand each who you feel is doing really great job, so that people can learn from.
Yeah, so
From 0 to 20, have you seen any brands?
yeah, so I'm going to name Mensa Brands, but I think it's because I've known them and we've selected them from a large number of brands. But I think Karagiri did a superb job in the 0 to 20 crore range in terms of their product quality. All of that was just superb. A non-Mensa brand, I would say, I think Neiman Shoes and what they're doing now, I think seems very interesting, right? I think in the 20 to 100 crore range, I would say one brand that I think I really like and what they're doing is Priyasi, which does jewelry, costume jewelry. It's growing really fast, has a great following, right? Doing really well, right? And north of 100 crores, I think there are very many. I mean, if I go back to my early days of Myntra, I think HRX has done a superb job. I feel really good. I mean, I was part of the birth of that brand, and I feel like that's done a fantastic job, right? So I think
These are the three major.
yeah, right. It shows up in the algorithm.
Have you seen any other patterns in terms of demography, in terms of people or like geography, where there's a highest spending power, or these are the people who are like heavily on it?
So I'll tell you, it depends a little bit Raj, on the ASP,
Okay.
right? If you're talking about ASPs between 500 and 1,500 rupees, it's actually quite evenly spread out. There is a larger growth happening in tier 2, tier 3 cities than in the metros
Okay.
because there's just no access. If you go beyond 1,500 rupees in ASP, then I think it becomes very concentrated in the top 30 cities because the spending power is more there, right? So if I look at demographics, at least in fashion, it's quite counterintuitive, right? Northeast, Coimbatore, Salem, Chandigarh are all large markets because there's spending power. There are no real malls, so people buy a lot of premium products online, right?
Oh, that's a good insight. Like because there are not like many branded real
There are
malls.
no real branded malls, so you buy online, right? And you buy expensive stuff online.
Yeah.
I go back a little bit, maybe a bit dated, but if I look at my Myntra experience, right, first, very counterintuitively, men buy a lot more than women. And the reason is, by the way, men are very brand loyal. So once you find a shirt that fits, you keep buying the same shirt on the same platform, right?
Yeah.
Whereas women generally try more things. Therefore, men are lifetime value to cost of customer acquisition slightly better. So I think that's one interesting factoid. The second, I think, which is quite counterintuitive in my mind is, the growth in the non-metro cities has been always, for example, Northeast is one of the largest markets for Myntra. You don't think about it, right? I mean, there's a fairly large warehouse in Gangtok for Myntra, right? And just it's interesting because you don't think of it that way, but it's large market because people are very fashion forward.
Okay. So another question, like with D2C, is a lot of people's face is a retention.
Yes.
Like you sell it to multiple people, you do performance, you do marketing, everything is good, but the making them buy again and again is a challenge.
Yes.
How do you tackle
I
that?
think the
Because if
first
you-
way to tackle it is through category expansion, right? It's very hard if you're a shirt brand to get retention.
Yeah.
You don't buy so many shirts. You have to then say, I will sell accessories. I will sell trousers. I will sell shoes. So increasing the occasions for purchase from a single brand has to be one big lever on retention. So if you like the one brand, see, almost anything in lifestyle can extend. I'll give you a cool example of one of our brands is Villain. Villain is a fragrance brand, right? I mean, we just launched with Hardik Pandya and it's been quite cool, right? But Villain actually sells gold chains.
Will it a perfume brand?
Yeah, but actually, by the way, 20%, like 10%, I don't think 10% is now gold chains and attire. So, there's a hoodie, there's a Villain hoodie. there's sunglasses, and there is gold chains that are selling. And that increases retention because now you have more occasions to come and buy. Right? So I think category expansion is one big piece. I think the second, often talked about but very hard to execute, is customer lifecycle management. And there the balance is not to be intrusive, but to also be in touch. What do I mean by that, right? So, if you keep sending me notifications, I get annoyed. But on the other hand, if there is interesting new content that I keep posting about villain, which we do, then it's easier to stay in touch and the brand remains relevant. So when you have an occasion to purchase a perfume again, you think villain. So your top of mind recall goes on. So this always on marketing where you're relevant for the TG is the other way to improve retention, right? Because what happens is digitally, at least you're aware, right? You've seen the product recently. So when you decide to go buy, it's top of mind for you.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the second way to do it, right? Which is important. I think the third way to do it is actually ops, which is one of the most interesting things is the faster the delivery of the first, the higher the lifetime value of the consumer, at least in the case of almost all e-commerce platforms.
Yeah.
So the first delivery and delight in the first delivery is incredibly important.
Yeah. I mean, Zepto has clearly done that.
Yeah, Zepto's clearly done that. I think it just makes a difference, right? I mean, just this thing between satisfaction and delight improves retention dramatically,
Yeah,
right?
it does. It does.
Right? It's non-linear, right? You're satisfied, there's even returns, but when you're delighted, right, your retention goes up like 4x.
So I want to get to this part of, we were talking about why becoming a job creator is better. That's what he said.
Yep.
Right? It's
Yep.
much better, and there's a right time to get into entrepreneurship.
Yep.
What's the right time to get into entrepreneurship?
So this
what
is
is
one of
it?
my favorite questions. So I don't think there's the right time, right? And I think I'll give you an example. For a business that we have started like Mensa, right? Where you have to convince a set of founders to actually partner up with you. And you have to grow and scale brands, which are quite complicated. If you're a 25-year-old entrepreneur, it's hard to do because you need a set of life experiences that allow you to actually do this. So here, by the way, being a second, third time entrepreneur and having a little bit gray hair helps, right? Of course, you need to have energy and passion and all that, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's actually better
Experience.
to have experience.
True.
If, on the other hand, you're sort of trying to create a Facebook, right? Then it doesn't matter, right? Because you've created something new. But how many Facebooks are there? Not many, right? Or Instas or whatever else, right? So I think it's the nature of the problem you're trying to solve, Raj. If you're solving a first to the world problem and it's a digital product, then I think earlier is better because you're more creative, you're more in tune with the problem, all of that, right? Anything that involves what I would call boring operations execution type work, right? I think it's actually good as an entrepreneur to have some experiences. Let me give you another factor. I think failure makes for a better entrepreneur. If you have not gone through a tough time in your life, it's hard, right? I'll tell you, between Myntra, most people think about life as like this. It doesn't happen that way, right? Medlife was such a tough journey. Such a tough journey. I mean, we ran out of money. We had to borrow. We had to get debt in order to continue. I mean, it ended well, but we went through huge stress. It is one of the best learning experiences to start your business because you understand the value of cash and you understand the value of a business without an investor. If you have burnt your own money building a business, it's very different, right? You run it very differently, right? So I would say life experiences are also important because I think failure, for example, teaches you a lot. If you do it too early in life, right, you haven't gone through that. I think the third is, look, almost all startups take some form of external capital. There are rare exceptions, but almost everybody takes some form of external capital. The minute you take external capital, especially institutional external capital, right? Governance matters, which we've spoken about. And there again, by the way, experience matters. Because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't closed books in the past, it's hard to know what to do.
Yeah.
If you've never had an internal audit function, you don't know what to do, right? So I think, back to your question, I think it depends on the problem you're trying to solve. Anything that needs it, I would say, therefore, there's no right age. You can do it at 25, you can do it at 45, but some problems are better to solve when you're a little bit more age and
I
experience.
really love that answer. Like when you're building a digital first product, when that you're first to the world,
Yeah,
it's okay to just go out fresh.
it's just got absolutely. The other thing, which is a little bit more practical, is the later you start in life, you're less financially dependent on the startup. You've made some money, your food and your clothing and your children's education don't depend on the startup, right? That helps because it gives you enormous freedom mentally
Yeah.
to be able to take risks, to be able to do things, right?
Your risk-taking ability just increases massively.
Massively. And not only that, your ability to do the right thing increases massively. Because you're not chasing a valuation.
Yeah.
You're basically saying, I'm going to build this. I'm going to do it in what I think is the right way.
Yeah, this is my next gig.
This is my next gig, right? Exactly. So I think that's the other thing that I think is very, very different, right? Because if you have a little bit of that fallback option, that gives you enormous freedom. And therefore, second time founders, especially if you're a successful exit, actually are able to build and do things very, very, very well, right? Because they have the flexibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was just, while this answer, though I was focusing on the wisdom you're giving, I was just ticking the boxes for me. I was like, validation मिल रहा है, boss, नहीं मिल रहा है, कहाँ नहीं मिल रहा, कहाँ पे देखना पड़ेगा, कहाँ पे नहीं देखना पड़ेगा. Okay, like 2-3 things which you talked about. I'm like, okay, for this I need a senior person.
yeah. No, but I'll tell you, when I decided to start this, multiple people came out and asked me, "Are you mad? Why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're like in your 40s. Why don't you go be an investor?
Like kids
yeah. Why don't you go be an investor? And I think for all the people, I know many young people listen to your podcast. For people who are older who are listening to your podcast,
but there are 23% people who are above 40 age.
Superb. For all of them, right? Now's the best time to start. Because you have life experiences. You have some fallback options. And you have a lot of wisdom in terms of being able to make the right calls.
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity to create something special.
Yeah. And if you guys are really like entrepreneur, you can join me as well.
Yeah. Or join Mensa.
I need experience.
Yeah.
I need people to like do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just I want to take this part really well about the hiring, right? With your McKinsey experience, over the time, you go from like ground zero to become a C-suite. Okay. And then you start, like you almost became a part of a startup, which was technically like you kind of partnered with them in order to like grow. Like Myntra, you're like a very crucial part.
Yes.
And then now you're starting as a founder. Yeah. And you like hired, I mean, I don't know, like the top of the top people. Like I was going through your like, team section. I was like, wow, boss, like this team looks incredible, right?
Yeah.
So you get something right about hiring right people. As far as it looks like, right? Okay.
Yeah.
What is your take on hiring because team is the most essential part.
Yes.
And you need people who are smarter than you.
Yes, fully.
How do you check so somebody who's like super smart, you don't have corrective measures to actually test them. How do you hire them? Like let's say, I'll give you an example of what my problem is.
Sure.
I need to hire someone for something which I've already done.
Yep.
At let's say 24 to 30 CTC wala cost, because I've done that part.
Yes.
I understand what are the key essentials and I'll ask 5 questions. If he's like done with that, I know he's the right person.
Yep.
Right. But when I go to like let's say a crore CTC or like 70 CTC,
right,
I've never done this.
Yep.
I'm getting them because they can teach me.
Yep.
How do we?
So I think 3 parts to the very practical answer, right? The first is actually solve a problem with them. It doesn't matter how senior the hire. I always give them 3 questions of a current problem that I'm facing. And I get them to put down on paper how they would solve it. They take 3-4 days. They can do their research. They come back and tell me, here is how I would have done it. How does it help me? It helps me understand how they think. What level of detail do they get into? How hungry are they? How much research have they done? Some people come and give you some general gyan, right? Saying,
boss,
system solve karna padega. Others, on the other hand, have gone and done some research. They've said, I've gone to your website. Here is how the page looks. Here is what I think you should do. Some people go one step further and said, I looked at your page load speed and it wasn't great. Some others go back and say, look, I compared it to 4 competitors and here is the pricing difference that I think you should do. So if I give them a problem, I give everybody the same problem so I can compare horizontally.
Yeah. Nice.
So give them a problem, make them write down the answer, let them actually do real research and come back. It doesn't matter if they can be like a 20-year experienced guy, you still make them do this, right? That's really important, because if you don't do it and you're sort of in awe of their experience.
Yeah, because so sometimes that.
So I've hired, by the way, people in Myntra who are dramatically more senior than me, who have had a lot more experience, right? And it's worked out well. And by the way, I did the same thing in MedLife, and I've done the same thing in Mensa. I think your point of having people who are better than you is true. But I'm saying first you have to test on whether they're willing to go.
I love this like this whole thing that where you ask them 3 questions of your current problem,
Yeah.
and like, look at their approach. That's a brilliant way to do it.
And just get them to write stuff, right? So that's one. The second, most important, do ref checks, right? And if I have a simple rule in a ref check. If somebody doesn't say one negative thing about the person, I discard the ref check. With senior people, no, you call, no, you say, very, very good guy, everything works. Yeah, everything works, right? I don't get off the phone till I hear one thing that the person has to do differently from a development standpoint. Only then do you know you're getting a reasonable ref check.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a superficial ref check. I never outsource the ref check. I do it myself, right? So, second is do a ref check, right? Third is, easier to do in a Mensa-like setup, maybe harder if you're a very early startup, is have a panel. Have at least 3 people interview the person individually, but 3 people, and then you actually ask for their opinions in an unbiased manner. And the reason is sometimes you don't pick up on things that others will pick up on, and vice versa. So having 3 different people talk to them, even if you don't have those 3 people in your company, right? For the first few hires at Mensa, I had one of my investors do it, right? In addition to me. So, get 3 different perspectives on that person. That really helps.
Nice. It's a good one. I'm bothering you then.
Yeah, sure.
But here's another layer to that. This is what I use. Tell me if it's wrong, because it relates to your second point, the ref check one, right? Every time like somebody refers me to some person, like, hey, you should hire this guy and this like really good. I ask them, let's say if 1 year later we meet and things didn't work out between him and me, what do you think would be the reason why it didn't work out?
No, it's a great way to ask the question. It's basically what are the things to look out for in that person, right? It's the second thing I told you on the ref checks, right?
Exactly.
Getting something about the person. I think it's a great way to ask the question.
So like I
cool
do
way to
that,
ask the question.
And then it just
It's a great way to ask the question. But I think you have to get to that level of detail, right? Otherwise, superficially, everybody looks good, right? Nobody's going to say, oh, I suck and this person is terrible.
Exactly.
Should hire him, right?
Yeah. Okay, let me ask you a hard question.
Sure.
You've had a great run. Tell me the 3 biggest mistakes you've made.
I think the first is probably not taking risks earlier in life, right? Waited for a long time to sort of take risk.
Okay.
I think that's one thing that if I were to change, I would like to change, right? Second is sometimes not prioritizing health and family over success, however you define it. I think I've gotten better now with age, but I didn't do it in the early days. And I think that actually matters, right? You end up like working your ass off and
you
not
clearly
spending.
Passed the bar. You look like the ones who are like workaholics.
No, come on. No, but I think that's the second, I would say, thing that I would say. I think I would say these are the 2. I think these are the 2. I think these would be the 2.
Nice.
It was a very good question.
Oh, thank you. Finally.
It's a good question.
We got one question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very good question. No, I hadn't thought of it. It's a very good question.
One last question, and then I'm going to ask you one more question because we asked that to everybody. Okay. So the last question is, so when you're hiring specifically, like when you're interviewing the senior person, right, you're in awe.
Yep.
For example, let's say you are not a founder. I come to you and I want to pitch you my startup and I want to hire you as a CEO. And like, I'll be in awe. Like, I won't be able to command
No, by the way, interestingly, I've had that happen to me, right? I've hired like board members who I've been in awe of.
Yeah.
Right. I've hired like senior people who I've been in awe of.
Yeah, because you're dreaming of that person to join you, and then when they come,
100%, right? I think
what
it's
do you
normal.
do with that time?
No. The only thing I do is see if you have a standard method of how you're going to do the interview, then you have to get through these 3 questions. You have to get them to do some work. That's why this method works, because then you don't let the emotions control you, right? So I think you can tell them you're in awe of the person. I've done it many times. I'm like, You know,
So
the
the
very
best way is this. Actually, you tell them. You go tell, hey, you know what?
I'm
I
like,
dream
yeah,
of having
yeah,
something
yeah.
like you, but we have a standard
Yes,
process,
yes.
and you
I,
need
I
to
say that, right?
follow
I
that.
tell people, right, saying, look, I mean, this is like such a privilege to be able to have this conversation with you. But, we go through the same thing. So I hope you don't mind.
It's good one to say actually. It's your bread butter sandwich wala
Correct, correct, correct.
theory, right? Like you
Yeah.
butter them up, then you put a bread, then you put like the core vegetables.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Nice, eh? Nice man. Like just the one last question. I know it's
Sure.
gonna be very obvious answer for you, but uh, what do you feel like is the the next big opportunity for India, like the next $1 billion. Okay, so now I know that for you it's going to be consumer business,
Yeah.
but pick up a category. So where do you think that the founders, if they start solving problem, or they look into a particular category, you think the $1 billion businesses can be built?
Um, I think there are $1 billion brands waiting to be built in the lifestyle category. I think in beauty, I would sort of go beauty first, fashion second, food. I think there's $1 billion brands waiting to be built in food. I would say these are in the consumer side three immediate opportunities that I think are big. If you don't build a $1 billion business, and here's the distinction: for me, a $1 billion business is not $1 billion of valuation. A $1 billion business is $1 billion of revenue.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we should all aspire to do. I think we should create a new term, not like a unicorn, but we should build a term for a $1 billion business that becomes sexy and something that people aspire to do. And I think you can build multiple $1 billion revenue businesses over the next
Proficon.
10 years. ProfitCon. Yeah, I love it, right? I'm just saying we have to create one of these where I think in any of these three spaces, you can build a $1 billion revenue business in 10 years.
Yeah. No, you can. I also believe the same way, because the same insight that 80% brands are
Yeah,
unorganized market.
correct. And
And
therefore,
we
you
can
should
just
be able to, right? If you have a $120 billion market in this case that you were talking about, or a $180 billion market, you should be able to build it.
Yep. That's it. Thanks,
Wonderful.
man. Thanks for being here and actually having this conversation with me.
Yeah, no,
I really love the
I think the
insights.
time flew by.
Yeah, I didn't think of it.
Yeah. I didn't
have
think it was
like
like,
5-6 more questions in my head. I'm like, oh, I need, but I think we're short on time. Thanks for doing this. I really
great.
liked it. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'm really grateful that you spent time to watch it till the end. But now is the real time to action. Now is the time that you share it with the people who you believe has potential to build $1 billion startups, because you never know. Just this one share, that one conversation can spark an idea in your head or in your friend's head or in your family or some stranger's head that can help them turn around their lives completely. So please make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, and share it with as many people as you can, because one conversation is all it takes to change your life. Thank you so much for being a part of Figuring Out. Until the next episode, keep figuring out.